your eyes and welcome aboard, welcome aboard. And just this recognition as we begin that you're really giving yourself a radical gift, especially in a culture that's, kind of designed to draw you out of yourself. You're here and we're here together, on virtually and in person to hold space with each other and share this radical act of turning the attention inwards and meeting the truth of ourselves uh, with as much kindness and tonight emphasizing a thank you, a gratitude uh, that we get to do this and that you're probably here because you care about yourself and you wanted to do something that expresses your desire to be well and to be happy. And yeah, it's really an act of self-love. So just acknowledging that and whatever other intention you may have. And so just in arriving, there's a sense of permission. Sometimes we get here, but the rest of life keeps coming along and just this permission to sort of say not now and also permission to not force anything, to allow ourselves to arrive in our own organic way, no expectation. And so, but what can be very helpful for the attention to settle into here and this inward turning is to connect with our breath and just be present for the process of it, not needing it to necessarily be anyway, but to receive the breath and the sense of freshness and sensitivity. It's kind of the most noticeable process when we, oftentimes for most people, when we sit down and are quiet. So that can be a support and a help to your practice. And if there's a lot of activity in your mind, can even count the in breath and the out breath and just give the mind a job to do for a while and do that up to 10 and let it go if it doesn't serve you. If you don't need that, don't bother with it. But noticing where the attention lands with the breath is with the full process of it or at a location like in the nose or throat or chest or belly. And so in a sense, the breath can be an anchor for the attention, sort of a home base, something we come back to if we get lost, something we can stay with through this whole sitting session. If your practice opens up to, the full parade of other sensations and emotions and sounds and images and the thoughts that play through the mind, that's great too. And, there's always the breath to come back to kind of recenter if that supports you. And I think this is kind of where the art of our practice really is that, uh, something comes along and the attention bites down on it and poof, we're gone. And, um, I find it, I don't know, kind of a relief to know that when we're lost. We are literally lost until causes and conditions are such that we come back here into presence, into mindful kind of observation of the breath or, you know, our moment. And the art is really when we do come back, oftentimes it can be easy to sort of judge ourselves or but in coming back to have this sense of celebration of gratitude. Oh wow, I'm back. What's it like to be back? What does it feel like to be back? Not to be lost. And for some people, maybe there's only a few moments of that coming back, and that's okay. That's how practice starts. And but conditioning this celebration, this gratitude is such a powerful vehicle for continuing to come back. This thank you. It's possible to be here. It's your birthright. Uh, and so, so we just sit. And if the attention has wandered, just this gentle returning to here with a sense of thank you and thank you for being back here. And what does it feel like to be here? What's the signature of here? And again, if the attention has wandered, just putting the puppy back on the paper and, celebrating and feeling what it's like to be here. So, for those of you out there on Zoom, that's the end of our sitting period. Welcome back. And I think we're taking a 4 or 5 minute break. And there we go. Anyways, welcome to Mountain Stream. I'm Bruce Pardoe, and I've had the extraordinary good fortune to be associated with this Sangha for really 15 years now, and be sharing teachings during those 15 years. And I'm kind of out on the East Coast a lot these days, so it's especially poignant for me to be here in person. And wow, this center is just, it's radiating. It's glowing. It's, yeah. So thank you for your sincerity and your goodness in showing up. And today, I feel so, and so we had a day long yesterday about the wellspring of gratitude, recognizing the gratitude that's already there, that you don't have to do anything about. It's kind of your birthright. It's just really recognizing it. And today we're going to talk about gratitude and wisdom as being kind of two sides of the same coin, as being one. But at 3 a.m. Last night, it was the actual full moon. And this is kind of a big deal in Buddhism because the Buddha was born on a full moon, became enlightened on a full moon, and died on a full moon. And so it's commonly known as Losar. And during this period of time, there are literally at this moment around the globe, at all hours of the day on a full moon period, there are monastics and sincere practitioners who are observing this and practicing, and so it's considered a holy day and just auspicious. And it's just kind of like, the more people who are tuning in, the bigger the field. So you're part of that, and you're assisting in that vibration. And that's one of the things that I also wanted to take note of tonight as we explore the quality of gratitude in a world that is experiencing some significant, really hardship and suffering. And so, in kind of a dedication, may tonight's, our gathering here tonight be a support for us in nourishing our ability to hold the fullness and complexity of our world and ourselves in relationship to it, our ability to respond and be with it. And so we'll look at, so it comes back to this word permission, that there's actually permission, and it's appropriate to cultivate these qualities of heart and wisdom to it not only it just has an effect in the field, but it does, it's like a vitamin. Yeah, it's a supplement for a goodness we can share. So we'll look at gratitude in relation to inspiring and being a vehicle of our practice, as well as gratitude, especially in relation to the wisdom factors as expressed in the Four Noble Truths. Um, and uh, and we'll also see how gratitude is both a vehicle of practice and kind of the destination. And if we have time, we'll look at liberative dependent arising, that just articulates just how this flow of immersing ourselves in gratitude and practice opens up into liberation and freedom. So we'll see how far we get. Um, Now, not only is it Losar, but it's spring and it's springing and it's great. And I was just at Table Mountain looking at little pretty, they're tiny little flowers up there, carpets of them. It was with my daughter, so that was kind of sweet too. But I love spring because it's sort of life celebrating its own vibrancy with colors and renewal, and it's just something we feel in us. And so there's gratitude for the renewal. And what is gratitude actually? Gratitude is when we are happy and thankful for our own happiness. Um, so I just, I'm going to encourage you. Let's take a moment here and just see if you can close your eyes and bring to mind a moment when you felt grateful. Is it possible to connect with something clearly? Does a smile come to your face? And letting your attention just kind of rest in your body and feel if there is, maybe you're feeling gratitude for this moment. Maybe there's a memory of a grateful moment. Um, but can you feel that in your body? Some sense of maybe lightness or warmth or softness or expansion or flowing or who knows? But just touching into what's true for you at this direct level of how you feel gratitude, how you recognize the vibration, the feeling, the aliveness of gratitude as it expresses in you. And then when it feels like it, you're welcome to open your eyes. But I love this thing about Buddhism. Buddhism is known as the path of happiness. And the Buddha himself was known as the happy one. And so cultivating and recognizing and celebrating happiness in our practice is actually core and essential to our practice, especially given the fact that we are wired to respond more strongly to negative or challenging stimuli than to pleasant or comforting stimuli. So uh, I just also want to um, invite you to consider as we go through this evening, how does your practice support you? How when you have had a moment of actual mindfulness, what is mindfulness? That's why I kept saying as we were sitting, what does it feel like to be here? Does it feel good? You're doing this for some reason. There's probably something about it that you appreciate. So this combination of feeling and recognizing directly the benefits, the support, the stability, the grounding, the whatever it is for you about being here, about being present, about being mindful that supports you and celebrating that. The celebrating the gratitude of that continues, it makes it more continuous. We worked on this a lot yesterday. It helps. So, in this way, gratitude mixed with mindfulness becomes the vehicle for more and more moments of mindfulness until it reaches the point where it becomes continuous. And that's kind of, one of the aspirations of our practice. It's really possible. Our founding teacher lives it. How about that? Um, so let's hop off then into gratitude and the Four Noble Truths. Um, and the Four Noble Truths, I would say, are the most fundamental teachings in all of Buddhism for all traditions of Buddhism, whatever they might be. Um, and do a quick review. So basically, being human is weird. It's a our reality. There's this word called samsara, and it it's a trippy place. There's this recognition in Buddhism. I think so much of our culture is about staying away from these truths of the fact that there's just painful moments in our life, and if we're lucky, we get to get old, which typically is attended by some degree of lessening of abilities and infirmity, sickness, and ultimately death. And this is an inescapable. These are inescapable truths and aspects of our time here. And then not only that, but there's things that we, come into contact with that are awesome. We love them. They're great. And we would love for them to stay and remain. Our parents, family members, loved ones, children, hot fudge sundaes. Um, but they go, inevitably, everything that we hold dear will ultimately be separated from. And so the things that we enjoy, we pass. We are brought into contact with things that we don't enjoy, you know. And and then and then there's this other aspect of weirdness of the samsara, and that is it's just this kind of itching powder of a sense of I don't know if I've got this right. I don't know if I'm aligned with this place, if I'm really, you know, in a harmonious congress with the truth of how things are unfolding. And this kind of comes up especially in how we regard our sense of self. Because every time we really authentically turn the attention inwards and explore self, we kind of come up with a handful of mystery. And so there can be this itching background sense of like being a little off balance, a little I don't totally get it. Uh, and things like, well, here we are in beautiful Nevada City in this gorgeous Dharma center, and then there's people, who are digging diamonds out of, these mines. Or I saw something about people who are into picking sugarcane in just horrible conditions, or they're war zones. And, so why are we here and they're there? And, it's confusing, you know. So there's this, and it just is, it's not, it just is. And so that's kind of the first noble truth. Life's weird. Um, and then the second noble truth is that we want to make life unweird. And so we want the things that we enjoy to stay, but they're constantly shifting and morphing. And we want to keep away the things that we don't like. And so we're involved in this strategy, and it's so basic, it's so reflexive, and it's so obsessive compulsive. It's so central of more of what I want and keep away what I don't want, and not having just this balance and acceptance and openness. And so there, it's stressful. It's really, really stressful. And this is suffering. This is dukkha. This is the truth that when we have that thirst, to get more of what we like, if we get it, it just conditions us to want more of it. It's like drinking salt water and trying to quench your thirst. Uh, so, and I think with practice, we come to see the operation of this, the functioning of this, and there's sort of a bowing to the pervasiveness of it and the force of it. But the third noble truth is kind of saying, well, actually, you know what? It's possible for that obsessive compulsive pattern to soften and actually to die down. And when it does, there is a natural peace. There's a natural okayness that's there that is so there's the word Satchitananda. It's just suchness, presence, you know, and bliss, peace. Um, And so this is freedom. This is actually the absence of that strategy, the action of it is actual true peace. And then there's a pathway to that peace. Now, the really cool thing about and the pathway, we're going to explore the pathway to that peace, especially the first aspect of it, the wisdom aspect of that more fully. But the thing to recognize about gratitude is that gratitude short circuits that second aspect of thirst and craving and leaning towards and away. When we are grateful, it's not just that we're content, that greed for more of what we like and that aversion, that hatred to what we don't like are not operating. And we're actually not just content, they're not just not operating, we're overflowing with thankfulness for what's here and now. And so that's addressing the second noble truth and the third noble truth. Gratitude is both the vehicle extending our practice, inspiring our practice, and it's the destination. You know, and as we immerse ourselves in it more and more, it gets creamier and yummier and more subtle, more balanced, more stable, more immovable, more mountainous, more equanimous. So there's an eightfold noble path. This is our fourth noble truth. All these paths and numbers and everything like that. For a ADHD dyslexic guy, how I got into Buddhism, it's like, wow, it must really be good, the goods. You know, if I can keep up with it, any of you can. But the Eightfold Noble Path, basically, and here we go, another number, you can kind of break it into three areas. And those three areas are the wisdom aspect of the path, which in our Vipassana tradition, we typically start with. And then there's just and then there's what's known as sila, or ethical, non-harming action, way of being in the world. And the cool thing, Jack Cornfield says, it turns out running around stealing and killing doesn't lead to a very balanced, happy mind. And so um, the thing I love about gratitude and ethical conduct, which wise or so a lot of these the eightfold noble path, each one of those folds are often called right or wise. Uh, you know, wise speech, wise livelihood, um, and but I really like the word harmonious. And harmonious, the word dharma literally means, in its most basic translation, the way things are. And this is one of the things I think is so cool about Buddhism, is that it's just a very matter of fact empirical map of human experience that lays it out in a way it's very directive of like, okay, this is what you need to know. You can see and feel this stuff clearly. Then there's some option, there's some choice, and you might be able to orient to something that's more helpful and healthy and wholesome and leading to uh, well-being for yourself and others. So this piece about ethical conduct is it feels good, when you do something, when you refrain from something and you reflect on that. It's like, oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad I didn't do that. And there's a thankfulness. So the gratitude for that, in a sense, becomes that. There's the piece about, so there's wisdom, there's ethical conduct, and then there's a harmonious practice involving effort, meditation, and the concentration that meditation leads to. All of those things, as we cultivate them, that's why I asked earlier, does it feel good to meditate? Does it feel good when you actually have a moment of mindfulness? Has it ever served you? Do you have faith in it in some way, or confidence in it? Have you seen something that used to bug you, kind of flatten out with it. Cool beans. You know, drink that in those moments. And as practice supports you, celebrate those moments. You know, when you're thankful. Meister Eckhart, this wonderful Christian mystic, said, you know, if thank you was your only prayer, that would be enough to take you all the way to the kingdom of heaven on earth, in Christian terms, to what we would call enlightenment and awakening. But what we're going to do in more detail right now is explore the wisdom factor and see how gratitude is kind of the other side of wisdom. So gratitude's compelling everything in your practice all the way in all aspects of the practice. But in wisdom, it's really interesting to see how gratitude um, you know, it's a way of looking at these wisdom factors. So the wisdom factors are expressed in a harmonious understanding or view or vision of the Dharma, and especially a harmonious understanding of the Four Noble Truths themselves. So the Four Noble Truths are circular. They circle back on themselves, and we kind of go with as a spiral, and we meet deeper and deeper levels. A lot of times in practice it'll feel like, oh my goodness, I'm meeting this again, you know, scathing self-judgment, or I have done this argument, you know, with somebody who's not even here for the 15,000th time, and what am I doing? But it's actually, there's this confidence if we're really uh, authentic and sincere with ourselves and our practice. It's like, oh, you know, actually, it's getting a little deeper. I did pick up something from the 14,999th time. And so, anyways, the first aspect of wise under, and then the other aspect of wisdom is as a wise motivation for practice, a wise intention around practice, or a harmonious, an intention that's aligned with the way things are. So uh, the mundane or the basic, what they would share with the lay people when this was still over in Asia a while ago, um, was they would share reflections on karma, which is literally that uh, skillful, you know, actions have consequences. And so this goes, you know, into that ethical conduct. So watch what you're doing and feel the good fruits of that. So that's the first aspect. But then there's what's known as the supramundane. And these are really the liberative aspects of wisdom. And they're in our tradition of Vipassana, they're expressed as the three characteristics that are present at some degree in or have the ability to be present in any moment of experience. And interestingly enough, the Buddha said that uh, in there are 7 trillion mind moments in the blink of an eye. So if the blink of an eye is a second, it's interesting to me to know that one of the subatomic particles, a quark, oscillates in and out of existence 7 trillion times a second. How about that? It's so funny, you know, the things that the Dalai Lama has, and I've been to one of them, these Mind and Life conferences over in Dharamsala, invites all these scientists and listen to them go on and on about quantum stuff and, you know, psychological this and that and neurology and so on and so forth. And he's just sitting there, and you know, he's like, maybe they're catching up a little bit here. But normally these teachings are reserved for monastics because they have the container and the practice to hold the profundity of where they can lead. And they're also known, each of them, as a gateway to liberation. And they are that, you know, it's impermanent. It's just a changing river of, you know, kind of six things. your five senses and thoughts going through. It's like an orchestra, and the music is your life. And as we sit down, and we observe. So some of you were just following the breath, some of you were following this parade of phenomena that make up. It's like an elemental table that makes up, the complexity of each moment. Like in a movie, right? Each frame of the movie has a picture and some sound associated with it and some plot. So you've got sound, sight, and thought in there. And we also get taste and smell and bodily sensations. I mean, this is really immersive. This is a hell of an illusion. Um, so the impermanence is just recognizing that, boy, there's a lot of frames to this movie, and they're just those mind moments. They're there's nothing stable even for a second. And that's especially true. It's like, well, that's kind of hanging around there, that wood thing there, that mountain over there, that bell. But our perception of it, our reception of it is changing. I turn my head, and it's a completely different room. And, it's kind of stayed the same, but it's just changing in every moment. It's impermanent. It is a flow every moment of experience. There's no, like snowflakes, there's no two that could ever be exactly the same at the level of phenomena. And then as we explore, there's this thing of, okay, so, well, it's all changing. Does that apply to me too? Good old me, the star of the movie? Oops, oops. So there's this term anatta, or not self. And it's not no self, and it's not self. It's just saying it's not self. You can look, you know, as deep as you want to and go, well, that's me. And I'm pointing to my heart. That's probably the closest thing I can point to that's a me. But even that, I can, well, it's kind of, ooh, it changes a bunch. There's no solidity or stability in that. So the sense of self that we take for granted and the separation out that it implies is not fundamental, and is not actually to be found. Um, and so, uh, um, and then because it's always flowing and changing, and there's not defined self that can kind of grab onto it. It's impersonal. What you gonna do? You really gonna try? You think you're gonna be able to control it? Get the flow just right and get dialed in, and I'm not gonna have anything I don't like, and I'm gonna just have what I like. And uh, the other truth is the suffering piece, second noble truth, right? So there's the suffering. In every moment of experience, these characteristics are available and probably active in that moment to some degree or another. And really getting them and seeing them deeply and core is, it's like we have profound insights about them that our normal frame of reference all of a sudden drops away, and we open up into this ventilated flow, and it's free because everything's let go, because our normal frame of reference of controlling and holding on isn't operating in that moment. As profound it is. So let's look at each one of these aspects in relationship to gratitude. So impermanence is really, the liberative aspect of impermanence is gratitude for the preciousness and the fragility of each moment and the uniqueness of each moment. And I'm so touched by this. So there's this wonderful Zen practitioner, Isa. He had a beloved, beloved daughter, and she died suddenly. And apparently he was devastated, but um, based on his heart and in the face of this moment, uh, upon the death of his beloved daughter, he said, "Dew evaporates, and all our world is dew, so dear, so fresh, so fleeting." And, that's so dear. So gratitude, as we cultivate gratitude, gratitude connects with the preciousness of each and every moment. Gratitude's the other can be the other side of impermanence. It keeps us connected to the flow. It keeps us engaged. It keeps that appreciation, um, gratitude and not self. So, there's this thing about the painful part of our habitual form of self is that there's a separating out. There's a me here and a that out there, right? You're out there. It's not hello in here, you know. Um, and so when we were little, we got scared, and you know, we abandoned our innocence. We felt that something needed to be added to experience, that we needed to add protection because we got scared. And so we built up these walls. And if we're going to protect ourselves, we separated out. We didn't trust the flow anymore because we got hurt or shocked in some way. It's almost like a trauma response as an infant, and then our world is reinforcing this, in the way that other people are interacting with us, our family systems and culture. And so this wall gets built up, and like drops, forming a stalagmite in a cave. That each drop of experience can kind of reinforce that sense of separation, but it's actually an illusion. It's the origin of delusion, which and then it's that confusion, that misapprehension of how things are. It's so painful to see because we're seeing it all over the world in these conflicts, or the greed that would, cause children to go down into these mud pits to dig out diamonds and stuff. Just craziness. Um, uh, uh, so if we're separated out and we've got to protect ourselves and keep ourselves insulated from this flow, uh, how we're going to do that? There's our strategy in the second truth. I'm going to get more of what I like and keep away what I don't like, right? And this is how it becomes so, we keep doing that, and it doesn't necessarily work sometimes, but it doesn't work all the time. So we try even harder, and we condition it all the more deeply. And that's where we bow in the third noble truth to the profundity of what liberation can be when that actually drops away, because we don't know what life is like when it's not there, when it's not operating. Because even if we're not really feeling it in a moment, it's probably latently operating. Um, so Einstein says a human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. She experiences herself, her thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of her consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. So, the sense, what he's pointing to is that the sense of separation that we walk around in, that we inhabit for the most part, is a familiar distortion. But with practice, you know, uh, we can see through that. And this is where gratitude comes in such a touching way. So when I do gratitude for myself, and this is something we felt into in our time yesterday, when I do gratitude for myself, what does it feel like? If I'm happy for somebody else, that's known as sympathetic joy. I'm happy for your happiness. Wow, you look really pleased about that. That's awesome. Good for you. And I'm actually happy, your joy is meeting my receptivity and arousing joy in me. And it's interesting that when I feel, whether I'm feeling joy for myself or I'm feeling joy for you, it feels the same. And so one of the best teachings, the greatest non-dual teachings of all time, comes from the four foundations of mindfulness. Another four. Um, and the Buddha says in the refrain, a yogi, you, a practitioner, attends internally. A yogi attends externally with mindfulness, and a yogi attends both internally and externally with mindfulness. When we attend internally and externally at the same time, the sense of separation dissolves. It's just a whole that's there. And so, with when we're doing mudita practice, and we begin to recognize and we open up the field of inclusion of our gratitude, we can feel directly the fact that it's not an individual separated out self, it's a whole self. It's a wholeness. And it goes beyond some kind of a sense of self or pinning anything down to a self, to it's a whole of the moment. It's a whole of the suchness and the isness of now. And so gratitude practice, having gratitude for each other takes us out of ourselves and into inclusion, into not self in a very profound and deep way if we keep repeating and having interest in that. Um, the You can feel your boundaries softening. It's just so sweet. That's really, I think that's one of the key things of my practice is I just keep feeling into my boundaries. Oh, is it softening? Is it softening? So then on the suffering side, uh, if it's changing and impersonal, I don't have control, and it's incredibly stressful. Um, it spins us out, right? And so, in a moment when gratitude is there and we're full, whoop, there goes the suffering. And when we feel the dropping of the suffering and we feel the freedom of that, it's like, oh, wow. And, we were reflecting yesterday on the fact that we can even be grateful for our suffering because with practice, we can suffer more effectively. You know, we can suffer towards freedom. And I remember I had with a really profound moment. Maybe you remember this, Marcia. We were having a teachers' council meeting, and John and Heather came in late. They were never late. Uh, John Travis, our founding teacher, and he had somebody staying at his house, one of our former teachers, Heather, and their water had run out, and that's a big deal. Oh my God, I have to drill a new well. All the stories and projections that go on, and so they got here late, and then John had to leave and go back and meet somebody about the situation. So they walk in and share with us that their water is out. And Heather goes, yeah, that guy down the hill, he's growing a pot garden, and he's dug a new well, and he's using a lot of water, and he's drained the water table, and that's why our well is run dry. And John just goes, uh, he has this metaphor that he uses of like, these moments come by and they're like fish hooks that are baited with things and we can bite onto them, right? And he just simply said, I'm not going to bite. And he didn't bite. He left. He went out. I think he met with an electrician. A fuse had blown. They fixed the fuse and they got their water back. So I mean, there have been so many times where because of that, there was such a direct and obvious experiential embodied moment that I've reflected on that even when I broke my leg really badly, and I'd fallen off a ladder, my legs sticking out to the side, and it was terrible. And I'm lying on the ground, and I love to go hiking. That's my one probably favorite thing, and I've gone up to Table Mountain, I mean, dozens and dozens of times, and I was lying on the ground and really trying to practice and hold spaciousness and all that, because I had to stay, I had to be on it because I had to get the ambulance there and all that. And then the thought arose in my mind, I'll never get to go hiking on Table Mountain again. They're going to have to amputate my leg, and then I'm not going to bite arises. And it was so powerful and profound, and the suffering dropped away for a moment, and there was so much gratitude. There was so much gratitude. And the gratitude was the illumination of what the suffering could have been. The gratitude and the suffering were two sides of the same coin. So when we don't bite, we can celebrate that. And I'm just going to end with saying that, the more we reflect on this, the more we bring this into centrality, feeling, seeing directly, experiencing directly, the wisdom is guiding us into association with the direct experience. Gratitude is informing and illuminating and part of the direct experience. It's the kind of the core of the practice. And as we do that and we do that and we do that and we do that, it moves from gratitude to, oh, gratitude, gratitude. And this is fundamental. And it's not something I'm generating. It's the gratitude that's here. It's the gratitude. It's not my gratitude. It's the gratitude that's a fundamental piece, the harmonious gratitude, right? And it softens out into an immovable and unshakable equanimous gratitude. And this is known as the mind of a fully awakened being. Appreciative equanimity is what an arhat, a fully awakened being, walks around in and as. And I have talked a lot. And so I'm going to end with a couple of minutes of grateful metta. And so I'm just going to invite you, you've sat through all that, so you deserve a little goodie. And get as comfortable as you can. And just, you gave yourself a gift, whether it worked or not. You gave yourself a gift. You cared about yourself enough, to get here. There was the intention, the wisdom of wanting to be well and free. And maybe you did it because you're doing it for the benefit and well-being, not only of yourself, but of others whose lives you can touch. It's beautiful. This path of happiness. You have the right to be happy. It's okay to be happy. Your happiness is skillful and appropriate. It's permissible. And, you know, through the quantum field we inhabit, or whatever you want to call it, um, it touches everything. It shines like the sun. So with our thankfulness, when we're not upset or confused or craving, our hearts just naturally open. The gratitude includes, and there's loving kindness, and we have this centrality of a radiance of well-wishing, of friendliness that just wishes that all beings everywhere might be truly happy, and that is willing to selflessly dedicate any merit that we've generated here tonight together, get shared with all beings without discrimination, and that we truly wish that everyone, everything, all aspects, the suchness and the totality can be truly, truly happy.